We're back for another month of video, and today we're going to be checking out Discounty. But first, hi, I'm Ellie, and this is a cozy gaming club where I love to shine a light on lesser known cozy games. In case you don't know, Discounty is a dark cozy supermarket simulator where you've been called to the town of Blomkest to help your aunt run her supermarket. You'll be doing normal things like stocking your shelves and checking out customers, but things take a turn as sinister goings-on start to happen around town. You'll need to choose between taking the Joja route and making as much money as possible, or try and stay true to your small town ideals and stay on the citizens' good side. A big thank you to the developers for gifting me a key to check this out early. I've really enjoyed what I've played at Discounty so far, and here's what I got up to. The game starts, as always, with a character creator, and I dive straight into designing my pink-haired shop assistant. While there's a lot of different colour choices, I found the options limited when it came to choosing your clothes. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, at least it helped me make a quick decision. Before long, I was wrapped up with character creation and chatting to the bus driver on the way to Blomkest. It wasn't a long ride, although we did hear the famous Discounty jingle, which is when I learned that there was more than one Discounty. Interesting. We were soon pulling into Blomkest, and I disembarked the bus to find my Aunt Tella waiting for me. She was quick to greet me and even quicker to get me on my way to work, and before I knew it, we were walking up to Aunt Tella's pride and joy, Discounty, and she was walking away and leaving me to start my workday. There's not much love lost between this family, apparently. I stepped inside to find an oddly empty supermarket. I thought she was meant to have run this for a while, and I met Grace, the executive shop assistant who was here to show me the ropes. She kitted me out with a personal digital assistant where I could track all my tasks and inventory, and also gave me a tool belt for carrying items around. Then it was time to meet Delivery Guy, who also had a little jingle. He was dropping off some shelves and coolers for me to use to sell items, although I did have a little trouble placing them for some reason. Once I'd done that, I let Grace know, who then ordered another delivery, this time for all of the items I'd be selling. Guy was there in a jiffy with a fresh shipment of oven fries, milk, apples, toilet paper, and soda, which I organised neatly in the back room before stocking all the shelves and reporting back to Grace. She was delighted and had even set up a group of test shoppers to help me practice running the store. How nice of her. The till took a little getting used to. For each product, you need to look it up in the book of prices on the left, before inputting it on the number pad. But you can't just pan all over the number pad, each key has a specific way to press it with some shortcuts. And while I didn't get it immediately, you'll see how quick I get at this later in the game. But for now, I served my test customers and reported back to Grace. I was feeling pretty good about the store, and she suggested I head home before the big grand opening tomorrow. Tella was waiting outside to take me back to my new house, or trailer rather, because it turned out I'd be staying in Tella's back garden next to this strange looking and sounding building. But Tella said it was nothing to worry about, and after Tella shared her dreams with me, it was time to head to bed. Day 2 brought with it another Tella cutscene, and this one was a big indication of how my job at the supermarket was going to go. Tella asked me to hang up flyers as she thought incredibly late posters were better than no posters at all, which, fair, so it was time to explore the town. She let me know all the places she wanted me to hang them up and gave me a map to help me find my way around. I started at the bus stop where I'd arrived yesterday and then made my way down to the harbour. It looked a bit scruffy down there and smelled super fishy, so I quickly hung up my poster before sprinting back to the main town. My last stop was the bar, and thankfully I'd seen the sign for that the night before, so I knew it was up past my house and to the right. It didn't take me long to find the drunken turn, and I stuck up my poster before heading back to Discounty. It was time for the grand opening, and Discounty was looking so celebratory with the balloons and bunting, and a big stage for Tella to welcome everyone into the store. Everyone was excited, and with the crowd cheering for Discounty, I quickly ran inside to restock the shelves and open the door. Then it was finally time. I flipped the sign on the door and everyone started coming in, starting with Ms. Anderson. She's the old lady who's always first through the door at 9 AM every morning. In between each sale, I was quickly running around the shop and restocking shelves to make sure that nothing was sold out on our big day. Before I knew it, it was the end of the day and the ding-dong was sounding to clear everyone out. We did have one unhappy person who walked in just as the shop was closing, so left unhappy, which I think was a bit unfair personally, but for the most part, everyone was happy. The day wrapped up with Grace teaching me how to use the computer to reorder all of our items before I restocked the shelves to make sure we were ready for tomorrow. Then I was free to explore town, although Grace warned me to make sure I was in bed by midnight. Immediately after leaving the supermarket though, I encountered a cutscene with a strange yellow van with a biohazard symbol plastered on the side of it. Well, that doesn't look great, does it? As I investigated further, I found a whole area closed off with warning signs and tape, and that's when I met Cornelius. He was an investigative journalist and had heard some weird fog had been spreading in the forest that made people feel odd. Probably best that we don't go up there anytime soon, so I promptly headed in the opposite direction. The first shop I visited was Antiques, where they sold furniture, paint and wallpaper to decorate my home and discounty. Behind the next door, I found Mrs. Anderson's house and her adorable cat Winifred, who I tried to pet much to their anger, but I did get a trophy out of it. Next up was the drunken turn to meet Hilda, the pub landlord, followed by Elma at the county office. My final stop was the docks where I met Barbara and her fishy sticks, followed by Fisher. Fisher. There was nothing left for me to explore, so I called it a day and went to bed early, which turned out to be a good thing because I had so much to do on day 3. When I woke up the next morning, I saw a newspaper by my front door, and it turned out to be Cornelius's newspaper, the Heatherhome Herald. I hope I'm saying that right. They said we put the super in supermarket and announced our grand reopening, alongside a story of a CEO resigning for cutting safety measures to save money. I hope this isn't foreshadowing for later in the story. But we had a job to do, so I made my way outside to meet Teller for my new tasks for the day. She took me to meet Ted, who runs a furniture store where I could buy more shelves and coolers for the shop. Before leaving, Teller asked me to drop by to see her later as she had something else to discuss with me. But first, shelves. I went inside and met Ted, who welcomed me to the shop and introduced himself. Then I bought 2 coolers and 2 shelves to get started before heading to Discounties to set them up. For now, I only had 5 items, so I just set up all the new furniture. I didn't even fill them with duplicates before opening the store. It was actually quite a busy day, but before long I was on my way to meet Teller, who was waiting for me outside. She let me know that she wanted me to do more for the store than just stocking shelves and serving customers. She also wanted me to try to make trade deals with the various local businesses around town. So I made my way to the dock to start striking up deals. I started with Fisher the fisherman, but sadly he said that the owner of the cannery had a monopoly on all of the fish he caught. Not great, but I needed to talk to her too, so maybe I could achieve both at once. I spoke to Barbara next and she was more than happy for me to stock her fishy sticks and set me up with a trade deal immediately. But when it came to Fisher, things were a bit more complicated. She set me a challenge that if I could sell a special Christmas-themed fishy sticks, then she would consider lifting her monopoly. I begrudgingly accepted, and she let me know that if I spoke to Ted at the hardware store, he might be able to give me something to help me sell them quickly. There was one more trade deal to try and negotiate first though, so I made my way towards the farm, which is where I met Carl and discovered the giant tree blocking his way home. Apparently it had fallen during a storm a few days earlier, but the council were doing nothing to help with clearing it. To add to my disappointment, he also said that he would never do a trade deal with Discounty as he and Teller had bad blood. So much small town drama. On my way to find Teller, I spoke to Ted, who gave me an aquarium to help promote the Fishmas sticks in my shop. Apparently the fish swimming around make people think that the fishy sticks are more fresh. The joys of marketing. I decided to make my way back to Discounty and set up the new fishy stick section of my store, complete with the aquarium, before going to find Teller, who had another genius idea. The farmer Carl had also lost all of his sheep around town when the tree fell. You may have spotted them as I've been running around exploring, and the council had thus far been unwilling to help. But given that our resident councilman, Elmer, was obsessed with his precious park and that sheep had a tendency to destroy all plants in their path, Teller suggested we could perhaps nudge them in the right direction to give Elmer some proper motivation to clear the road. A truly devious idea that just might work. There were 8 sheep to collect in total and it was already 9 PM, so I had my work cut out for me. Fortunately, I had already seen a lot of the sheep on my various trips around town, and the loud barring whenever I got near one was a good indication of where I could find them. By 11 PM, I had rounded up all the rowdy sheep and deposited them in the park to ruin Elmer's evening. He was not happy and got to work clearing the trees so that the sheep could find their way home. Just to test it, I tried staying up until midnight one night and there was no punishment. I just collapsed, woke up the next day and continued as usual. Unsurprisingly, the tree was gone by the next morning and I was able to walk through the pathway to the farm to meet Carl again and discuss our potential trade deal. He was grateful for my genius plan to get him back home and offered to let me sell some of his products as a reward, starting with some rolled oats. I also had a little explore around the new area with its fancy house and beautiful lake before heading to work to start my shift. But there were more surprises today because Grace had added a new feature to the shop. Now I could condense crates in a flat pack that I could recycle at Ted's store to earn some money back. As you'll soon discover though, I made the fatal mistake of combining styrofoam with my cardboard to create a mix stack, which cannot be recycled and is only fit for the bin. Don't make the same mistake I did and bring a mix stack if you want your money back. It was finally time to open the shop and start selling all of my new stock, and I was glad to see the fishy sticks were selling like hotcakes. There must be something about those cinnamon-flavored fish that just had people in the Christmas spirit. They even sold out completely and I had to restock them in the middle of the day. After the busy day, I had so many empty boxes in the back that I needed to organize and more items to order from delivery guy, but it was soon time to call it a day. On day 5, there was another newspaper at my door to let me know that the issues with the forest were still ongoing, but that the fallen tree had been removed. There wasn't a lot to keep myself busy with this morning though, so I figured I'd go straight to Discounty and open the store. But once again, Grace had other ideas. She wanted to introduce me to the Discounty Rewards program, which gave me points for completing daily and weekly quests. The points could be spent to unlock new stock for the store and even get extra inventory space. I immediately completed my first quest to order more stock and unlock chocolate bars for the store, which I immediately ordered too. With everything set up, I opened a store, and after another successful day, I had sold all the Fishmas sticks, and it was time to return to Barbara to tell her the good news. Naturally, she was impressed by my achievement and reluctant to relinquish her monopoly, but a deal is a deal, and I'd sold all the Fishmas sticks. Then it was time to head to Fisher to tell him the good news and secure my third trade deal. To be honest, it didn't sound like Fisher was too excited about the monopoly being lifted though, but I was getting fresh fish now, so I was happy. I raced back home to let Tella know, and she said I'd lived up to her expectations, before moving on to the next part of her grand scheme, which I'd hear more about soon, apparently. It didn't take long though, because the next morning she was telling me her plan to knock into the closed tea shop next door to expand the store. I just needed to speak to Elmer to get permission, which should be easy, right? Elmer had something else he wanted to talk to me about first though, the printer. Apparently I can use the printer in the council office to print posters to promote the shop for a low fee. But the printer was getting on in years and Elmer wanted to upgrade it. Except there was no budget. I'd not even used the printer yet, but I said I'd think about it. I was just about to ask him about the tea shop too when he vanished from the office. I guess maybe it was too early in the day? Anyway, I finally found him at the park and he supported my idea but said that I'd need to talk to the owner of the tea shop, Gina. She lived out of town but often visited Discounty to pick up her shopping. Too bad that I had no idea what she looked like. I was considering just talking to every person who comes in the store, when Elmer mentioned I should talk to delivery guys since they work together and he may know what she looked like. When I got to the store though, Grace had another development for me. She'd noticed the store had started getting dirty with all the new customers coming in and out, so she'd bought me a bucket and a sponge to clean up with. I'm yet to see Grace do anything herself though. Just saying. I wish she would help though, as running the store was starting to get really difficult. We were constantly running out of stock and I'd have to keep dashing out from behind the counter to restock shelves and a massive queue would build up. In my rush, I completely forgot about looking for Gina, and before I knew it, the day was finished and Grace had even more to share with me. At the end of each day, I would now receive a car rating, which shared what I was making money from, tracked my achievements, and showed me how happy my customers were. With nothing left to do for the day, as I couldn't continue any quests, I made my way home, which is when I found litter outside of my shack. Apparently, all my new customers were just tossing their rubbish on the floor, and we couldn't have Discounty getting a bad reputation. So now I needed to collect any litter I saw and recycle it at Ted's hardware store. We are 1 week into Discounty and so much has happened already, but I promise there's still a lot to look forward to in this video. On day 7, I rushed to Discounty hoping to open it and meet Gina when I was interrupted by Teller with some sad news. She had fired Grace, effective immediately. Apparently I'd been doing too good of a job and now we didn't need her anymore. I was feeling really bad, especially after what I'd said about Grace yesterday, but I still had a shop to run and a Gina to meet. To start with, I ordered 2 crates of apples to complete one of my daily Discounty quests, and when Gus arrived I took the opportunity to quiz him about Gina, who apparently has blonde hair and also wears the grey delivery guy uniform. Good to know. When I opened the store, I kept my eyes peeled, and while I was restocking one of the shelves, I saw her and immediately jumped to say hello. Gina was really nice and explained that she'd inherited the shop next door from her granddad, and that she'd be happy to sell if I spoke to Derek, who ran the bank. Easy peasy. After wrapping up the day and restocking the shop, I made my way to the bank to meet Derek. He was more than happy for me to buy the tea shop, assuming I already had the correct permits and licenses required to do so. I was not expecting a cozy game to have so much bureaucracy, but Derek went on for ages about why I needed my permit, and eventually suggested I go to speak to Elmer. Not again. But off I went to find Elmer to ask him for a permit, which is when he started acting very sus. Basically saying how the council were here for me if I ever needed a permit, and he'd be happy to get me one if I did him a favour and recycled some papers. Seems innocent, but these weren't just any run-of-the-mill papers though. There was evidence of embezzlement, rejected plans, confidential environmental assessments, and more. Was I becoming part of the problem? I dutifully recycled all of them though before heading back to Elmer to get my permit, which he gave to me immediately even though he was supposed to get council approval. I am part of the problem. But I went back to Derek and handed over my permit. I just needed 3,000 shills to buy the tea shop now, which would be easy after one more day of shopping. Except the shop was shut on Sundays, as Teller helpfully informed me the next day. She gave me a new quest to meet all of the townsfolk, but to be honest, I'd already met most of them. The only person I was missing was the factory owner, which was locked behind the factory enshrouded quest. After a little run around, I made my way to bed at 11 AM. Monday was looking much more promising as I made my way to Discounty to earn my 3,000 shills. I got straight to work in the store, but even after my long day, I sadly didn't have enough money to buy the tea shop. I was still 500 short. So I printed some new posters promoting the store and hung them up around town. While I was doing that, I stumbled across a couple of random cutscenes, starting with learning more about John Key from Cornelius at the statue. Then I encountered Elmer in his precious park, arguing with some woman I'd not met before with pink hair. And finally I spoke to Ted, who told me a little about his past and how he'd started running a hardware store. I accidentally spent a lot of money, which meant that I was still short of buying the tea shop on day 10, but on day 11 I'd finally raised enough shills to close a sale. Derek was delighted and Gina offered to break down the walls between the two stores to help with the expansion, but I'd need to wait until day 12 to see the outcome. The rest of day 11 was spent exploring, which is when I came across Grace. It turned out that she still lived in Blomcast and was having issues with her neighbours who'd built their fence across the road. Her neighbour, it turns out, was a mysterious pink-haired woman I was still yet to meet. I wonder who she is. On day 12, I sprinted to Discounty immediately to see what it looked like, and honestly I didn't think it looked too terrible, but Miss Anderson was not impressed. She missed Dale's tea shop and said I'd destroyed his legacy by absorbing it. Hearing this coming from Ms. Anderson was especially heartbreaking, as she was the first person to come in my store every day. But I needed the extra space and we'd still kept the exterior mostly the same. Inside it was a bit of a mess and half of the floor was just dirt, but I knew exactly what to do. One of the shops in town was a furniture store, and I made my way there to buy whatever wall and flooring they had available to beautify the shop a little. Fortunately, the red floor matched quite well with the yellow walls and gave quite a regal sort of look to the store in my opinion. With that done, I opened the shop and, as always, Ms. Anderson was the first person through the door. She had some choice words to say, which again hurt my feelings a little, but clearly she was still happy to shop here, so she couldn't be that offended. Slowly, all the villagers started to trickle in, each with their own thoughts about the remodel. On a whole, it was a successful day though, and I left the store to encounter another cutscene with Teller. She was curious to hear what people had thought about the expansion and suggested that I lie low for a few days, and also let me know that Ted had some new furniture in stock. In the meantime, she was going to be working on the next stage of her plan, and I've got to admit, I was worried for whatever was coming next. But I did what I was told and visited Ted, who had some cool new deep shelves and coolers that could hold 10 items instead of 5. So I bought some of them. Then as I was leaving, I encountered some rats. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but this will soon become a much bigger issue. I think that day 13 was probably the busiest and the longest day of this entire month-long video, so buckle up as we get started. My day began with a rather scathing newspaper article accusing Discounty of discounting our cultural heritage. Not the nicest thing to read first thing in the morning, but I kept my chin up as I made my way outside to meet Teller. She'd also seen the article and was not impressed, but told me to go to speak to Cornelius to try and iron things out. He was literally the last person I wanted to speak to right now, but I was ever reliable and made my way to find him. There was no sign of Cornelius, but there was another development in that the staircase down to the docks was shut. It was time to visit Elmer again, this time about another issue. When I spoke to him though, he once again brought up the printer and suggested I donate 500 shills to upgrade it, which was not happening anytime soon. Finally, I was able to ask him about the staircase, and he said that it was unsafe and that I should have my faith in my local council representative to fix it. I did not have faith, so I checked back tomorrow to make sure it got done. There was plenty to be getting on with today though. I still needed to find Cornelius, so I made my way to the forest boundary where I often found him lurking in search of a story. Instead of Cornelius, I found Teller though, who said that the van had left, so we should be able to get into the forest now. She wanted to arrange a trade deal with Lapley Manufacturing as they were the most profitable business in town, and this mess was holding that up. My new task was to find a way in, and she subtly suggested that I investigate the deliveries, as they were still getting goods in and out of the woods. Well, it's a good thing I know the local delivery guy. After she had left, Cornelius arrived, and I took the opportunity to quickly speak to him. Not that it was very productive. He basically said that he had a duty to report on the news and couldn't help if I was doing things that most people didn't agree with. Defeated, I made my way back to Teller to tell her the news, and she said that she knew what to do next. Build a new supermarket. We'd need a lot of money, so we'd have to get a bank loan, but thankfully her friend Derek at the bank would help her out. With only 30 minutes left until Discounty opened, I raced to the bank to talk to Derek. Despite his friendship with Teller, he couldn't just give me a loan though. First, I need to prove I was serious by completing 3 tasks. 1, I needed to prove that I was known as a real supermarket by keeping a good rating and putting up posters. 2, I needed to operate as a real supermarket by increasing my trade deals with all the local businesses to stock more of their products. And 3, I needed to raise 8,000 shills in funds to prove that I could make a profit as a supermarket. None of these would be easy, but I set myself the goal of completing all 3 by the end of this video. I still had 18 days to go, so that was doable. Right? Maybe. Let's find out. First things first, I needed to open Discounty, so I quickly ran there and flung open the doors to welcome in Miss Anderson and co. It was another productive day, and with 1,000 shills in the bank, I placed an order to talk to Gus. After a little convincing, he agreed to hide me in the back of his truck while he did his delivery to Lapley Manufacturing, so that I could sneak inside. We were almost caught by Miss Anderson being shady in the car park, but I was soon able to hop into his truck and we started the drive to the factory. Once there, I overheard a suspicious conversation between Elmer and a pink-haired lady who I now know is called Tammy. Then it was time to meet her myself. She was impressed with my business pitch, but before she agreed to a trade deal, she wanted to come and check out the store herself. Apparently, she only works with the best. Then I visited the dock to try and upgrade my current trade deals, but neither Barbara or Fisher were interested, until I'd sold more of their current stock. Boo, but understandable. I was going to need to sell a lot more fish in my shop. Just when I was planning to call it a day, I got stopped outside of my house by a suspicious, shadowy figure who casually threatened me before walking away. I decided to make one last trip before bed and went to the farm where I came across Carl, warding his home against a supernatural creature called the Niece. He'd recently fallen into a lot of misfortune, from a sheep escaping to the fallen tree, and apparently that was the work of the niece, who'd also troubled his father before him. There was a lot more going on in this town than I had originally thought. I was not surprised, but when I went to check the stairs the next morning, I found that they had not yet been fixed. But I decided to give Elmer one more day to prove himself. My goal today was to earn Tammy's praise, so I got to work in Discounty, determined to give her the best customer experience when she came into the shop. I ran all around the store to make sure all the shelves were stocked and checked her out the second she came to the till. Hopefully that was enough to win her favour. Thankfully it was, and as I spoke to Tammy, she told me to come visit her at the factory. She also suggested that we tear down John Key's house, which immediately sent shivers down my spine. The townsfolk would not be happy if we did that. That much I knew already. When checking out the computer, I realised we'd unlocked a ton of new items because of the expansion. So I got to work buying all of the new stock for the store. I could have unlocked the scanner, but I was worried it wouldn't work as quickly as my current checkout routine, so I left it for now and prioritised unlocking the new stock. I wrapped up the day by visiting Carl again to see if there'd been a development in his niece story, and there had. His prize sheep Fluffles had gone missing. He suggested I looked for him in the forest, but it was way too late to do that tonight, so I went to bed. The next morning I started by visiting Tammy, but got hopelessly lost in the new forest area, although I did end up finding Fluffles in a very strange location. Eventually I found my way to the factory and Tammy, and we set up a trade deal selling toothpaste. Once I'd proven myself, I'd be able to access the better range of Lapley manufacturing goods. My next stop was to visit Elmer, who quizzed me about my relationship status, and finally I was able to complain about the staircase, which still hadn't been fixed, and raise my concern about all of the rats around Blomcast. He apparently knew about this situation, but the council wasn't taking him seriously, and everything he'd tried so far hadn't worked. With my options with Elmer exhausted, I made my way to the farm to return Fluffles and let Carl know that he was okay. While I was there, he also asked for my help to cull his sheep, which I was not on board with at all. Usually he asked Hilda to help out, so I figured I would go and try and convince her to help instead, as that was something I did not want to be getting involved in. She wasn't super keen either, and explained that her conscience had gotten the better of her, especially with the irony of him not wanting to cull Fluffles because he was special. Instead, she suggested that I mark all the sheep, including Fluffles, to convince him that they were all special. It was an interesting tactic, and I decided to give it a go. Thankfully, the gambit worked, and Carl saw the errors of his ways. He agreed that from now on he would focus on selling sheep's cheese instead of roast, and asked if I'd like to stock it in Discounty. This was a much better alternative for me, so I agreed, although there was a third option, and I'm intrigued to know what would have happened if I'd clicked that. Finally, I visited Barbara at the docks and convinced her that it was time to upgrade our trade deal as well, and she told me all about her exciting new business pitch: fish-shaped fishy sticks. The team wasn't sure though, so she asked me to survey all the townsfolk and get their thoughts on the fish-shaped fishy sticks. The next day brought with it not one, but 2 newspapers. The water in the town had been contaminated, but the forest was now open again, so swings and roundabouts. One public health disaster averted, just to be replaced by another. There were only a few hours to go before I needed to clock in for my shift at Discounty, so I got to work quizzing all the townsfolk about their thoughts on fish-shaped fishy sticks. Elmer was unsurprisingly a total downer, and also told me that he had no budget to fix the stairs, so there was another task on my plate. Ted thought fishy fishes was a fun idea, while Ms. Anderson said her cat Fred would eat them whether they were fish-shaped or not. Grace also thought they'd be more fun fish-shaped, and Chester ruled that fish-shaped fish were childish and uncool. So on a whole, very mixed feedback. But I'd upheld my part of the bargain and dutifully reported the survey results back to Barbara, who would be taking them to a board meeting the next day. On my way back to Discounty, I came across some spray paint at the bus stop, and after interacting with it, I triggered a cutscene between Derek and his son Chester. They were arguing because Chester was continuously going to Sparkcliffe to hang out with a gang, who Derek thought were leading him astray. So much family drama, although totally not my problem. But now, after putting in a shift at Discounty, it was time to call it a day. When I ran past the rats at Isenkrams the next day, I got a different piece of dialogue, which prompted me to talk to Ted and find out what was going on. And so began a bit of confusion that lasted for days. Essentially, when I clicked on the rat bowl, it said I should give them something they wanted, and talk to the person who worked here to find out what it is. But when I spoke to Ted, he just said their favourite food, when I was expecting him to tell me what their favourite food was. It took me days to figure it out, I am ashamed to say. Barbara had some exciting news when I went to see her later that morning. Her fishy fishes had been approved and I would be able to sell them in Discounty. That was 2 trade deals completed and 2 to go. Inspired by this success, I also tried to talk to Fisher, who went really weird for some reason. He clammed up completely and asked me to come speak to him about it tomorrow instead. But the title of the quest was Man Overboard. Naturally, the first thing I did the next morning was go to check on Fisher, but he'd vanished. Maybe the niece had got him? I checked his house, but no luck, so I went to check in on his friends and see if they knew where he was. Hilda had no idea at all, but Carl suggested I try his house again with a secret knock. Which worked! He let me inside, but was apparently so busy listening to a radio show that he wasn't up to company. When I left, I was confronted by all of his friends, and we decided to stage an intervention. They'd work on getting him back on his feet as long as I looked after his boat while he was down. I was already a pro after cleaning up after all my customers, so cleaning Fisher's boat too was no problem at all. So I clocked in on my first shift of swabbing the deck before clocking into my second shift of running Discounty, which was the final positive shift I needed to prove to Derek that we were a real supermarket. Day 19 started with swabbing the decks again, and I finally remembered to corner Gina at Discounty to ask for her help to fix the harbour staircase. She was more than happy to help out and let me know to tell Elmer that she'd sort it. Success! But when I relayed this information to Elmer, he was devastated. Apparently Gina is the most expensive contractor around, to which I say maybe he should have found someone himself. Day 20 started much the same as day 19, swabbing the decks followed by my shift at Discounty. However, there was one big difference. The stairs were fixed. Thank you, Gina. Now I could get down to the harbour much quicker than before. Elmer did have to dig into the budget for his garden to pay for the repairs though, but that's what he deserved, I suppose. After another successful day at Discounty, I went to visit Tammy to see if I could finally upgrade our trade deal, and she was angry. She was real angry. Apparently, she'd noticed Barbara hanging around the factory and thought that she was spying on her, so she asked me to investigate. And so began the sneaky portion of the game. I hid behind some trees and lay in wait for Barbara's arrival, and then carefully followed her around the lake, making sure I was shrouded by trees and bushes the entire way around. Okay, I wasn't the sneakiest, but I tried. Anyway, of course she saw me and told me I was welcome to come for a walk with her anytime I wanted, and that she was definitely not spying on Tammy. Although what she said when she was walking away definitely made me question that. Fisher was back on his feet on day 21, and with a brand new fish to sell. The periwinkle salmon was back in the slightly green waters around Blomkest. It sounded sus, but I wasn't complaining though. I reported back to Tammy about Barbara not spying on her, and honestly she was still as suspicious of her as I was, but she still agreed to upgrade our trade deal, and let me start selling plastic straws as well as toothpaste. That was all 4 trade deals upgraded, and I just needed to return to Derek now. But first I opened up Discounty for the public. I still needed to raise 800 shills after all for my final quest. My store was really starting to come along now. I had a lot of new stock to sell and lots of fancy equipment to help boost my sales. I reported back to Derek, who was impressed with my ability to increase my trade deals, which just left the profit quest, and my quest to work out what the hell was going on with the rats, of course. Until I went to hang up a poster at the harbour and got pulled into another cutscene with Fisher. Remember how I said the water was looking particularly gross and green recently? Well, I wasn't the only one who had noticed. Fisher didn't seem worried though, but it seemed like something that was going to come up again. The following day, I went to see Tammy, and on the way back, I noticed a sheep bleating. Now, if I'm being honest, I'd heard the sheep noise a lot, and assumed it was the game glitching after the last time I'd found the sheep in the woods. Well, this time, I decided to follow the noise, and lo and behold, found another sheep chilling in his abandoned factory. I thought I'd let Carl know that one of his sheep had escaped, but when I spoke to him, all of his sheep were safely in the pen. He said that that sheep was probably Sleepy Dora, and that she was always found napping in the forest, but some of the kids would give her something to perk her up. Which was interesting. I tried asking around town, but no one seemed to know anything about it. The next day, I finally figured out what I'd been missing, which is nothing. I'd been waiting for someone to tell me specifically what I needed for each rat, but they'd already vaguely told me. So on day 23, I decided to just do it myself and decided to approach the rats with some cheese and won their favour, as well as access to the sewer grate which teleported me to Discounty. I love fast travel, so I was buzzing to unlock this, not that the Discounty map was too large or the player too slow, so I didn't really use them that much. With that revelation, I realised I could probably do Dora as well, so I went to the shop and picked up all the items with Pep, like soda, energy drinks, and coffee. Tried all of them until one of them worked and she zoomed away to reveal another teleport point. The rat quest hadn't been completed though, so I knew there had to be at least one more of them out there, and I spent the entire rest of the day searching until I found them on the docks. But I couldn't continue that quest as Barbara and Fisher were already in bed, which is where I should have been. When I asked Fisher about it the next morning, he said that rats are rats and this was a harder. So I tried asking Barbara instead, who suggested making a rat home for them. I wasn't really sure about this one, and even though I tried visiting the furniture store, there wasn't really anything there that would be suitable for rat furniture. Today anyway, because when I went back the next day, there was a cute dollhouse waiting for me, which was the perfect rat house. I placed it on a dock for them and unlocked my next fast travel grate, which I used to zoom back to Discounty and open the store. On day 26, the only quest I had left was to earn 8,000, and today was the day. After a really successful day at Discounty, I wrapped up with 9,500 shills and rushed straight to Derek to pay the loan. But there was one issue. If I wanted to take out the loan, I'd need to hire a new employee. Honestly, I kinda wanted a new employee because I was having so much trouble stocking all the shelves while also manning the till. However, after Teller had fired our last employee, I'm not sure how keen she'd be. She seemed invested in her master plan though, but refused to let us rehire Grace and told me to find someone else. When I was walking back towards town, I hit another cutscene with Derek, who confessed that we didn't really need to hire another employee, but that he'd consider it a favour because his son Chester was misbehaving and could really use a role model. Chester, who happened to be listening to every single thing we were saying before running away. How did I get mixed up in his family drama? I followed him to the park to find him defacing Elmer's tree. Maybe he did need a job because he was always getting up to mischief. Things didn't quite go to plan though. When I went to Discounty the next morning to start my day, I found Chester outside running a lemonade stand and pilfering all of my customers. Teller was furious and told me to do something about it, so I did the first thing I thought of, and dunked a whole bottle of shampoo into the lemonade when Chester wasn't looking. After nearly poisoning Ms. Anderson, Elmer took a drink instead and blew up at Chester in his poisonous lemonade. I felt a bit guilty, to be honest, after Chester faced Elmer's wrath and then the wrath of his mum as well. With the lemonade stand closed down, it was time for me to get to work, and I was so good at this checkout minigame now. I was checking out the items faster than they could put them on the conveyor belt. The next morning brought Chester to my door, but this time for a job. He offered to help stock shelves, which I was more than happy with, and I brought him in to get to work. Before going in myself though, I popped to let Derek know that his son was now my employee, and he agreed to approve my loan. Of course, I went straight to tell her, and she was ecstatic and had a surprise for me. She wouldn't tell me what though until the following day. So after another day of work at Discounty, I went to bed and went to meet Teller there the next morning. The moment I saw her standing outside of John Key's house, I felt the nerves starting. It turned out that she had abandoned her plan to open a new Discounty and instead set her sights on renovating John Key's house. I could already see where this was going, but there was nothing I could do about it. In fact, the construction had already begun, and when I entered the shop, I saw the extra space the extension had allowed, but I knew it wouldn't end well. Today was Sunday, so Discounty was closed, so I ended up just calling it a day to see what happened next, but I wish I'd stocked up on items first. The next morning brought with it a concerning newspaper, but there was nothing amiss when I got to Discounty, so I opened the store and got to work. When I left Discounty though, it was a different story. A stage had been erected outside, along with red banners and barricades. Several villagers were also gathered angrily outside of the store, yelling along with Mrs. Anderson as she protested. This was not good. This was not good at all. For the next couple of days, I went to work and kept my head down, but I think I'm gonna end it there. There weren't really seasons in this game, but I played 31 days, which I think constitutes as a month. But let me know down in the comments if you want to see more of Discounty, and I'll put another video together. What did you think about it though? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Are you going to be picking it up? Let me know, and I hope to see you next video. Bye!